Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
I got to talking to a random guy who turned out to be a doctor. He noticed a dark patch under my nail and recommended I go get it checked out. It turned out to be skin cancer. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. People of Reddit, what's one mistake or decision you made that completely altered the course of your life?
Number 1.
Forgot hamburger buns. Dad died, depressed, was without a job for over a year. Applied at a few different places and heard nothing back. Went to a barbecue at a friend's house and stopped at the store first. We got everything we needed, went out to the car, started packing up and realized we forgot hamburger buns. I go back in the store, I'm walking down the frozen foods aisle and run into an old coworker, who happened to now be a manager at one of the places I applied at, months ago. Chatted it up with him for a little bit, and 3 days later, I got a call out of the blue to come in for an interview at his company he worked at. I've been with the company 18 years, last month, all because of that chance encounter in the frozen food aisle, all because I forgot hamburger buns.
Number 2.
Was working a dead-end service job in the early 90s. On a day off, I had a couple friends over, and we were bored so we decided to go bowling, which we hardly ever did. But for extra variety also decided to go one suburb over to a different bowling alley than we would normally go to. Bowled a couple of games, and then the next lane over starts filling up with a group. 2 guys I knew from high school are in that group and we get to chatting. One of them works for a software company that needed a phone support guy and he recalled I was into computers. This was 1991 so there wasn't a flood of kids from college looking to get into the industry yet. So he asked me to come in for an interview at the place. Went down 2 days later, got the job, spent 7 years at that company, and now going on 28 years in the tech industry. All with a high school diploma and a basic network evening course that the first company paid me to take a couple of years after I started with them.
Number 3.
One day my foreman just flat out didn't show up to work. I was vaguely familiar with what had to go on at the site, and who needed to do it, so I just started calling people, and talking to those on site saying I was filling in for him for today. Fast forward a few months and people are saying they greatly prefer me organizing jobs, and management starts giving me jobs of my own. I start getting great reviews from clients and my jobs are making money. Eventually my old foreman gets fired, not because of me directly, but because of some questionable antics and poor performance. Now I'm enjoying a significantly better paying and more fulfilling job. What started as a job to make a bit of money while I figured out what I want to do has turned into something with serious career potential.
Number 4.
Right out of high school I got a job at a machine shop so I could support myself while I went to school. Did years of working there during the day and going to school at night. It got to the point where I was really good at it, and I liked going into work more than I did going to school, so I just dropped out and made my career machining. This was decades ago before trades were en vogue and in demand, and when everyone said you needed a degree to be successful. So my decision was met with a lot of anguish from family and friends. Even though I was making good money I still felt like I let everyone down until 2008 happened. And I didn't have to worry about work while all my friends with degrees had to flip burgers to make ends meet. Then everyone started to realize that being a tradesman wasn't so bad and my esteem over my career choice improved. Now, I work in the aerospace industry and make a pretty decent living at a gravy job with zero stress. Pretty happy now about how everything turned out.
Number 5.
A buddy of mine called me up one day to tell me he and his toxic controlling girlfriend had broken up and he wanted to celebrate with a few drinks. At the time, I was living a very antisocial lifestyle, and I almost said no, but something that day told me I needed to get out of the house. So I agreed. Turns out that was the night I'd meet my future wife. When we were reminiscing about that night, my wife said she, too, almost declined going out.
Number 6.
Said yes to going to the pub. I was on a backpacking trip around Europe. At a hostel in Belfast, this Australian guy who was in the same dorm as me asked if anyone wanted to join him for a drink. Me and a New Zealander tagged along. We had an absolutely epic night in what was then still a city under martial law. Next day we all went in different directions but I kept in contact with the Australian. At some stage, months later, he mentions that I should come and visit him in Australia. About 6 months later I did. I had a fantastic time, traveled around Australia and liked it so much that I applied for a residency permit. 30 years later I'm still here. It's been absolutely great, but none of that would have happened if I didn't say yes to a few beers all the way back in the 80s.
Number 7.
Went to meet my bio mom. 8 years later, a crippling disorder, brain damage, and some significant trauma later. Turns out there was a very good reason I was adopted. I got to meet my sisters though, and I'm the uncle to a whole herd of nieces and nephews, and I wouldn't trade that for the world. Makes the damage worth it, honestly. The way their faces light up when they see me and how loved I feel with them is something you can't ever replace. To clarify, I met her 8 years ago. She didn't abuse me for 8 years, she abused me for 2, stalked and harassed me for 2 more, and has been out of my life for 4 years or so, since I got a restraining order.
Number 8.
I failed an unfailable class at university because I totally flunked studying. I was so sure it is unfailable I didn't study at all. I had to retake the class in which there were group projects. Second time over, I was in a team with this girl. I married her last summer.
Number 9.
Smoked synthetic cannabis. Mental breakdown, antipsychotics, complete change in my physique and personality. 20 to 30 was a blur. I'm on very low doses of my meds with careful management from my shrink, but I know I will need them for the rest of my life. Lost so many years and experiences that I'll never get back. Stay the hell away from spice, K2, Black Mamba and the like if you value your mind.
Number 10.
My wonderful 2-year-old daughter was not planned. But thanks to her, I decided to have a vasectomy. I had always had one slightly enlarged testicle due to a mountain biking accident 10 years prior. My urologist had it biopsied because it didn't look right. Turns out I had had testicular cancer for an impossible to determine period of time. 4 rounds of chemo later and I'm perfectly fine. Had I not had my daughter, I would have probably had much worse results years later when it finally made its presence known via pain and it spread into my body. So my daughter technically saved my life, which is knowledge I'm sure she'll use on with great glee during her teenage years when I'm trying to punish her.
Number 11.
Years ago I was heading to Hawaii in February and I was pasty white. So I decided to go to a tanning salon first to get base tan and not burn in high. The bed was in a mirrored room and I noticed my left testicle was enlarged. Had surgery and radiation and I am fine. So getting a tan saved me from dying of cancer.
Number 12.
I read the book I, Claudius. Loved it so much I scheduled a trip to visit Italy. While touring the sites, I randomly met an American guy who was an IT guy, like me, for an American school there. A few weeks after coming back to the States, I emailed him and he told me he's getting married and moving back to the States and offered me his old position. 3 months later I was on a plane back to Italy. Lived there for 4 amazing years and made some great lifelong friends.
Number 13.
Flying into Tulsa from San Diego in 1998, coming home on a 3-week leave from the service, after a 16-month deployment. A few days before, there had been a bad ice storm and the roads were still slick. My wife insisted on picking me up from the airport after I suggested taking a cab home. I didn't want her driving on those slick roads, because there was an 8-mile stretch of country 2-lane road from our house to town, and it could get pretty treacherous, due to minimal maintenance. She refused to drive an old Cherokee Chief that I had at the house and chose to drive her 2WD Ranger pickup. She lost control of the truck and went down a 40 embankment, losing her life in the process. We had a 1-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son at home, that grew up without a mother, and I've spent the last 22 years kicking myself for not simply pissing her off to the point that she wouldn't drive, and I could just make up with her when I got home. I should have argued harder with her or had one of her brothers come and pick me up. I met my new daughter for the first time, with her mother gone. I was basically meeting both my children for the first time, as I had deployed when my son was my daughter's age. Neither knew me, and both were absolutely terrified and confused. I was still obligated to the Corps for another year, but they did right by me. I stayed home on hardship, drew base pay until my ease/discharge, dealing with being a single parent, PTSD and transitioning to civilian life. The happy ending is that both children had a great childhood, grew up smart, well-adjusted, and successful. Daughter is finishing her master's degree, and my son is a successful electrician raising a young son on his own. There's always a struggle in my mind that I'll always deal with. My wife wasn't going to ever move from Oklahoma, and I planned on being a career Marine, so we would have ended up divorced, no doubt, and I wouldn't have the bond with my children that I do now. I lost the love of my life, but I gained a great relationship with my kids. My children lost their mother, but they didn't have to grow up with an absent father. Life is funny.
Number 14.
Freshman year I asked some kid in the college dorm's cafeteria if we could sit at his table because all the others are full. Start small talking and he mentions his tuition is free because his dad is military. I'm like, wait. My dad is military and I'm paying? He says that it's because his dad is now disabled. Well, it turns out some of my dad's ailments from military service qualify him as disabled, and guess who got free college after that? And my sister too. They hide the website pretty well, and they definitely don't tell vets about the program for their dependents, so my family never would have known if I hadn't sat down with some random guy. Thanks, guy.
Number 15.
When I was 27, I missed my usual train to work and had to wait another 30 minutes. So I got to talking to a random guy who turned out to be a doctor. He noticed a dark patch under my nail and recommended I go get it checked out. It turned out to be subungual melanoma, skin cancer. I thought it was a bruise and probably wouldn't have gone to the doctors over it. I never saw him again.
Number 16.
Ordered a pizza from Domino's. Wound up with the worst case of food poisoning I've ever had. I was essentially bedridden for 3 months, and I've since developed severe post-infectious IBS that I've been struggling with for the past 3 years. I'm basically not functional probably 50% of the time. It's essentially destroyed my quality of life, and I'm terrified that I may never have a normal life again. It's taken everything I enjoyed or was passionate about away from me. If I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and stop myself from eating that effing pizza. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.